It's a pleasure to be able to talk to everybody today. Um, I am a longtime person on Chrome. For the past few years, I've been working in the group called Chrome Operations, which is responsible for a lot of the tooling and systems and processes that we use to actually help people land changes and ship them. The motto of the group is to, maybe you heard this before, is to make Chrome easy to change, hard to break, and ship on time. So easy to change is we want to try and make it easy for you to land changes, but hard to break means we watch all of your tests and make sure that whatever you changed didn't make things worse, hopefully. And then, of course, we need to get it out the door. So I'm going to be talking mostly about the first two things today in what we call the life of a commit talk. And it's actually a little bit bigger than the commit. It's a life of a change. It's how you actually change Chrome. So let's get started. And this is a very, very introductory talk. Hopefully that'll be useful for people. If you have questions, let me know. But I apologize if you all know this already, and maybe this will be useful for somebody watching on live stream anyway. Okay, it's not easy. We try to make it easy, but it's a complicated process and there's a lot of different steps. So I'm gonna try to go through them all as relatively quickly as we can, but hopefully it'll still be clear. Also, I'm assuming you're not completely new to Google, or if you're watching this externally, maybe you're an intern or maybe you're just a contributor outside or somebody interested, ignore this page, you won't be able to read this stuff. It doesn't really matter because Chrome is open source and you can do essentially all of this stuff in the open. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. So what does it look like? Well, one way to do this is to just say, find something you want to fix. Maybe you've got a bug in Chrome that's really bothering you, or maybe you want to help somebody with a new feature. Obviously, you can't really fix something until you check out the code. So do that. Figure out how to build stuff locally, maybe poke around the source code. Go in and fix your change, make your change. And then everything we do in Chrome, we ask that it could be code reviewed. It's very important, both from a correctness point of view, from a security point of view, and just from a not getting everybody to know the code point of view. That somebody else has to look at every change that you're making, every change that's going into the project. So I'll talk about that. We'll talk about how the tests get run. We run an enormous number of tests, something more north of a couple 100 million tests a day, both before your change lands and after. And then again, we'll talk about the code review bit. And then eventually, once everything is good, you actually land it, then we run even more tests. There's a lot of tests that we don't run before your change lands because they're too expensive or they take too long. So we do more, and then hopefully, if everything goes through that, your change is in. Okay, so let's go into that in a little bit more detail. So you're a brand new person and you want to do something to Chrome, and you type in Chromium or Chrome on the website, or maybe getting started with Chrome or contributing to Chrome, and you end up at chromium.org, which is this page. So chromium.org is the home of really two things. It's home of the browser and the Chrome OS. There are, of course, other sites of projects that funnel into Chrome that make sense for things like Web, RTC, and V8. I'm going to be focusing on the Chromium browser. Hopefully that is okay, and that's why you're here. So click on that Chromium link. That takes you to this page, which is sort of the generic landing page for Chromium. And you can see, poking around through this, that there's a Getting Involved section, this thing that I've highlighted here. That sounds like a good link for actually figuring out how to get started. So click on that. And this takes you a link to how you can start getting plugged into things. You can join the mailing groups where a lot of our traffic is, like Chromium Dev and Blink Dev. You can help out with testing. You can start poking around. Like if you think you had a bug, we'll take you to the test database and you can search for your bug to see if somebody else has reported it already. Or you can file a new bug. And then if you actually want to contribute by developing on Chrome, you can triage bugs. I should have mentioned that. It's a very important channel for our contributors. A lot of people aren't necessarily coders, but they want to help out with the project by helping us file bugs and reproduce tests and reproduce bugs and things like that. But in this case, we're talking about people who actually want to change things. So look down under that Chromium section, And one way to do this is to actually find a bug that somebody has reported. So we actually keep a list of things that are supposedly quote unquote good first bugs for somebody getting started on the project. That's that section that I just highlighted there. The idea behind a good first bug theoretically is that it's something that is not too hard. So you click on that link, and that takes us to a list of bugs in the bug database. The bug database is also called Monorail. Monorail is the name of the product, or we just call it bugs.chromium.org, which is the instance of this product. Monorail is something that the Chrome operations team actually develops itself. We wrote our own bug tracker because we needed a bunch of features that we couldn't find either from the existing open source bug trackers at the time or from Google's internal bug tracker before it started having public things. So this is our own bug tracker. You can see that there's something like 1,000 open bugs that are labeled good first bug. I have them sorted in descending order. So you can see these numbers of the bug numbers here over on the left are going down. And if you were to sort it in ascending order, which the bug numbers go chronologically, monotonically up, so the older the number, the lower the number, the older the bug. The oldest bug that we have that's labeled a good first bug actually was filed in 2008. In fact, it might actually go a little bit before that because it was migrated as one of the bugs from before Chrome went open source. That bug only has 3 digits, if you can believe it. And as you can see, we now have bugs that have 7 digits. So it's kind of striking that we have something that's that old and yet is supposedly still a good first bug. I don't know if I really believe that it's a good first bug if it's been open for 12 years. But it's been better than it was when I've done this talk before. One of the first bugs that came up on this site was actually implement video capture. But I guess somebody implemented video capture in the past couple of years, but I'm not convinced that was a good first bug either. On the other hand, let's just look at this first bug at the top, and it says update the JSON5 Python library that we're using. And that doesn't sound too bad. So maybe I'll click on that and we'll take a look at it. Okay, and here, this is where I admit that I'm cheating. This is a bug that I reported. But you can say, okay, we've got this library, it's PyJSON5, it's more than 2 years old, we should update to a newer version. In general, we try to, where we have third-party dependencies on other open source packages, we try to keep them very up to date because we want to make sure we're getting all of the security fixes that other packages have. And we also want to make sure that if we need to change things, it's always easier to do that when you're closer to the tip of tree and you can land a change at tip of tree without having to worry about how to merge it back. So I'm saying, yeah, I want to update third-party PyJSON5. Yeah, it's probably not too bad. So I'm going to work on this. Okay, so what's the first thing we want to do there is we want to go and say, what is this third-party PyJSON5 thing? Good way to figure that out is to go to our code search site, which is at source.chromium.org. Again, here you can see that we have different indexes for Chromium and Chromium OS. We also have an index here for GN, which is one of the build tools that we use. But you can actually start typing into this search box right at the beginning. You don't actually have to select Chromium. It'll give you the same place. If you don't select something, I believe it searches across all 3 systems. So I'm going to start typing into it, and you can see immediately we start getting an autocomplete result. And it looks like that first thing is coming back from something in Chromium source. That looks like it's probably pointing to the thing this bug is referring to. So I'm going to click on that. And that gets me the search results. And I can see right up there at the top, there's a README file. That also sounds promising. It's maybe going to give me directions on what to do. So I'm going to click on that. And that pulls up the contents of the file. And we're still in code source at this code search source.chromium.org at this point in time. So this shows me the contents of the file. And obviously, it doesn't really give me a whole lot of information here. But what it is telling me is that it's pulling something from GitHub. And I'm saying, oh, okay, I guess I need to update to a newer version of repo on GitHub. There's also another clue here is that it's pointing to my library on GitHub, which means that, again, I'm cheating with this example because this is code I wrote. And I'm updating something that I probably should have updated more often than once every 2 years, but I'm doing that now. So for me, this is an easy change. Odds are good. It won't be quite so easy for you, but that's okay. Okay, so When I'm starting to work on a bug, remember there's a lot of people working on Chrome. We want to coordinate our communication with everybody. So the way to do that is to take ownership of the bug. This assumes that you actually have bug editing privileges. If you don't, this is kind of tricky, and maybe what you want to do is try to communicate through the Chromium dev list or something else that you want to work on this, and maybe find somebody you can ask for bug editing privileges so that you can take ownership of it. And you also want to mark the bug as started once you've actually started working on it. So that's the way somebody else knows that you are working on it and it's not just assigned to you. The next thing you want to do, of course, is get the code. How do I actually fix this? I need to check out all the code. So we go back to chromium.org and the Chromium page, and that second link that we have there tells you how to get the code. So we'll click on that. Here's another page that you get. And again, remember, all of this stuff is exactly what you would see out in public if this was what you were doing if you were working at Google. We have slightly different variations on this stuff. So there's inscription at the top of this, but I'm not going to go into that. 99% of the time, you can do everything you want to do in Chrome without ever needing any of the internal stuff. They're clicking through the instructions here. I'm doing this on a Mac, so I would click on the Mac link. But what we're going to do is I'm going to skip over that. I'm flip over to a Mac terminal and get started here. So the first thing it says is you need to check out something called Depot Tools. So Depot Tools is a separate repository of tools that we have for working with the source code and the changes. Clone that. That is relatively small. As you can see up here, it takes me a few, actually, I guess it only took me about 5 seconds to clone, which is a little hard to believe, but it's pretty fast. I have a fast network connection from my home machine, and then you want to add Depot Tools to your path. That'll pick up all of the other tools that we have. Okay, now we actually want to run and fetch the Chromium code itself. The way to do that is to run a command called fetch. And fetch allows you to fetch different repositories and projects that we manage, like Chromium or V8 or WebRTC. The main one is Chromium, so I'm going to run fetch Chromium, and just so I can sort of convey what's going on here, I'm going to time it so you can see me running time fetch Chromium. Fetch is a wrapper around gclient. Gclient is the tool that we have to manage collections of repositories. So it's kind of like managing Git submodules, but it's a little bit fancier than that. And fetch just sets up the default configuration of gclient. So it does that, and we run gclient, and we're off and running. Here we go. And this is where we come to a grinding halt. So Chromium is very large. To fetch all of the history that we're doing for all of this, it ends up fetching down somewhere between 30 and 60 gigabytes of data, I think. On a Mac, it ends up being a little bit more than 30. If you're trying to fetch Android, we fetch a lot of Android dependencies, and I think it ends up being something like twice that. So it's going to take a while. Even on my fast network connection from home, it takes me a little bit over an hour. And, you know, if you don't have quite such a fast connection at home, it may take you, you know, overnight to do this. And I apologize. We, as a project, collectively apologize. As you've been seeing from the talks in Chrome University, Chrome is very, very large, and we do a lot of things. Somebody notes on the chat that you can actually pass the --no-history to fetch flag to fetch, and that can speed things up a lot. If you don't care about it, you know, probably cuts it down by like a factor of 5 or something. Okay, but now I've got everything. I'm now going to skip over the process of what I actually needed to do to change everything. Basically, in my case, it involved cloning down an updated version of the repo from GitHub and pulling it into this third-party JSON5 thing. Your mileage obviously is going to differ. The important thing that most people are going to hit when they're actually trying to change something on Chrome is building it. There's instructions for how to do this. The build tools we use are things called GN and Ninja. GN is a tool that stands for, that's called, the GN stands for Generate Ninja. What it actually does is it's a meta build system that describes how all of the components of Chrome are assembled, and then it generates a bunch of Ninja files. Ninja files are kind of like Makefiles, but they're much dumber, much simpler. And then the Ninja tool itself will actually do all of the compiling. So you want to look into that, generate something in, usually in a directory under something called out. You'll create a directory to put all of the build projects in Chrome and debug it and run tests and things like that. All of that varies widely depending on what you're actually trying to change. I'm not going to go into any of all of it here. Hopefully some of these other talks are going to help you with some of that. But at this point, I'm showing you, assuming you've figured out your change and you've got everything that you want to do. So you commit the changes using Git. Also, I should have said, we use Git for all of our source code. I'm not going to explain how that works. Hopefully people can figure that out, or maybe we'll find other talks, and there is documentation for that as well. But at the end of the day, you've got all your changes ready. You're going to commit something, so you just say git commit, and it pulls up a dialog, a text file when in your editor or of choice, says give me a commit message, and here I am typing things in. I'm also going to commit an error at this point, a mistake that if you're watching very closely, you'll figure out down the road. We want to link the changes that we have to bugs in the bug database so you can get the fuller context of what you're doing, and I actually forgot to do that in this change. So you can see here, there's a bug colon field and a cursor entry, and I forgot to enter that. So anybody who's really playing along and wants to see what I'm doing on this change, you can call me out on that, and my bad. Okay, but you save that, and then you run gitcl upload, and it gives you this description, a chance to change your description if it's different from the commit change that you had, and then it takes it and uploads it to our code review server, which is called Garrett. And so here's the output of this. You can sort of see a list of the files that I was changing up above, and then somewhere close to the end of this output, you can see that we're printing out a URL. The URL actually is a link of your change on Garrett. So you can go look at it in Garrett, which is what we're going to do now. That takes us to this page. And here you can see it's the same description that I basically had. And things are a little bit out of order here because what you're actually seeing is the screenshot I took from further on in the process. So I've added another reviewer besides my initial reviewer, and you can actually tell that that reviewer has actually already approved the change. Gloss over that now. But the main thing here is that once you're ready, you can scroll down on this page and look at your change and make sure it is what you expect it to be. Sometimes it can be easy to get things confused with Git. And you can pick up changes you don't mean to pick up. So it's always good, a little bit good to sanity check things before you send it out for review to make sure you're asking people to look at the right stuff. There's also a way here where you can trigger what we are called try jobs. And a try job is a automated continuous build task that we have that'll take your change and it'll apply it to the tip of tree on Chrome on a particular machine configuration, go build Chrome at that configuration, run tests at that configuration, and you can do that to sort of make sure that your changes work before you actually send it out for review. That is often helpful because we often don't want to waste people's time trying to review things that are just broken. One super easy way to do that is to click on this commit queue dry run button that you might see at the top header of the page. And that'll run tests against all of the different configurations we have on all of the different platforms. It'll run the same exact tests that we'll run when we're actually ready to commit it. That's why we call it a dry run. But so either you do that or you click on the start review thing, and the start review will send an email out to your reviewers telling them, hey, here's this change I'd like you to take a look at. So do that, and you wait for somebody to review the change. It's important at this point to note that this usually isn't instantaneous. Of course, most of your reviewers are doing other things. Sometimes the appropriate reviewer may actually be in a different time zone from you or on the other side of the globe. And so while we hope for people to review stuff as quickly as you can, in practice, it's often good to be working on several different changes at once so that you're not blocked waiting on this sort of stuff. Also, if you are a reviewer, we try to ask that you be fairly responsive. In particular, try to review things within the first 24 hours of getting a notification. We don't want to leave people hanging. There's lots of guidelines on the site about how to be a good reviewer and the etiquette for review, how to leave good feedback, that sort of thing. Try to be responsive, even if you're too busy. Try to get back to the CL and get back to the author and say, you know what, I'm too busy to look at this right now. Here's somebody else that might be qualified to look at it. Or if there really isn't somebody else to be qualified, at least keep the author informed of what you're doing so that it's not frustrating. It's super frustrating to post changes and have nobody ever look at them, especially for new committers, and we really like to try to avoid that. Okay, but at some point, somebody comes back and approves it. If you were looking at my change, you could see that somebody did approve my change. Here you can see the results from my commit queue dry run. The green boxes mean that everything passed on those particular configurations, but you can see a couple of red boxes that indicate that something actually failed, which means I need to fix something before this change can land successfully. So if you click on that box, if you're lucky, you'll land on this page, and there'll be a nice little overview tab at the top that actually says what broke. And here I can read this and I can say, okay, I need to go do this, and I failed to update a couple of files. Full disclaimer, we don't actually have this working for every possible kind of failure you might get. And so sometimes you have to scroll down on the page and hunt around in log files and things like that, trying to figure out what actually goes wrong. Usually there's some sort of red box or something on the page that'll tell you what's going on that fails things. But over time, we hope to get this more and more consistent so that it's really easy to see what's wrong. So as I mentioned, I failed to update a couple of things. The error message in this particular log file actually ended up being pretty good, so I was able to go back and fix stuff. So I upload a new patch with changes, and then usually you can see a retry failed option down here below your change, and that'll rerun just the things that failed the last time. Now, as it happens, I tripped over a bug in our system at this point, and because I was already running one of the builders that got triggered automatically, I couldn't select this, and so I had to manually select it by clicking that Choose Try Jobs button right next to the thing that's highlighted. But I run that again, I type in the name of the bot that works, and that goes off and runs, and eventually that passes as well. And now at this point, I can now, it's been approved, all of my tests passed. Now I can click on submit to CQ and actually land the change. So I click on that, and more time passes. Depending on what you've run previously, this may reuse the results of all of your previously successful runs. If too much time goes on between when you ran those tests and when you try to land the change, we'll rerun them again. So, best case, maybe this will take like 10 to 15 minutes to land, and worst case, it could take, a few hours. In general, we try to have a commit queue submission complete on average in 50 minutes or less, and in worst case time, 2 hours or less. But sometimes it's worse, especially if we have outages and things like that. But if everything works, then you can come back to this page and you'll get an email saying the page is landed, and you can go look at the top and you can see your change was merged. So there's a green box up at the top left, and you can see a commit hash that actually with a link that'll actually take you there, and you can go see that this thing has in fact been committed. Congratulations, that's your first change. And then after that, I mentioned there are an additional pass of builders. Sometimes people are confused because they're like, I ran all my tests. Why is there more testing going on? Well, Chrome is always advancing in time. And so when you run your tests, while those tests are running, other changes may land. And so your test may be slightly out of date. And so what we actually do is we have a whole other set of builders that are set up to just be continuously building a tip of tree to make sure stuff stays working. And we have a set of groups of people that are called sheriffs that watch these builders to make sure that things are working and are responsible for going back and hunting down the various failures that show up. Also, we don't test every single configuration before your change lands. For example, on the Mac, we currently support Chrome running on everything from 10.10 to 10.15. So that's 6 different versions of the operating system. It would be kind of silly to run the same test 6 different times when 99% of the time it does the same thing every single time. So we don't run every version ahead of time, but we do try to run every version after everything lands. And then there are some other configurations like our fuzzing testing and some of the memory checking tools and things like that that are too slow to run before or too expensive to run before every change lands. So we only run them afterwards. So we go through this additional round of testing. This, because some of this stuff is slow, like the fuzz test and the performance testing, You may not get complete feedback on whether or not your change is solid immediately. Most changes will cycle within an hour or so, but some things actually take up to a day or so before you can feel pretty good and say, yep, finally everything's stuck and my change is finally in there. But assuming that happens and that the change sticks, is what we call it, you can finally go in and update your change to fixed, which is what I've done here. Also, I mentioned earlier that I failed to enter the bug notification or the bug number in my change. If I had done that, there would have been updates in this bug saying, hey, somebody landed a change for this. Instead, you can see I went and then manually added a link to it in comment 6. But that's it. Hopefully that gives you a pretty good overview. If you have any questions, as they said, type it in the chat. I don't see any at the moment. Or just contact me later. I'm dpranky@google.com. You can find my notification actually by just searching on the website, because I'm also one of the community managers for Chrome. So if you have any questions about what's going on in Chrome or questions with interactions on Chrome, things like that, feel free to ask me for that too. Thanks.